So our recording has just started. So if you have any other questions just before we start. Okay. Government legislation, Stephen, excellent. We'll be coming on to that a little bit later on in the session also. So, and is it a bad idea to have too many citations? It's a bad idea to have too many quotations, Richard, but you need to have as many citations as is necessary to support the ideas that you are including in your work, in your essay. Okay. Guys, do we have a thumbs up? Are we ready to roll? Okay, good stuff, Kieran. Off I go. Okay, so I'll deliver this by way of a presentation and PowerPoint slide first. Okay, so there's a number of slides here, but there's a number of examples incorporated in each of the different slides. So we're going to record this session. So it'll record the slides, it'll record all of your questions. So you'll be able to receive, well, you will receive an MP4 copy of this. So you'll be able to go back through it and have a look at it at any time you want. Okay. So first of all, referencing. Yes, it is the formal way of you acknowledging the source of information, the idea, the concept, the diagram, the fact, the figure, or the theory that you're using in your writing. It is an absolute key part of academic life. You have to cite all the information in your academic writing. Now, this is taken from the NUI guide, okay, the plagiarism guide, okay, the student code. So all work submitted by students for assessment, for publication, and or for public presentation is accepted on the understanding that it is their own work and contains their own original contribution, except where explicitly referenced using the accepted norms and formats of the appropriate academic discipline. Now note that it says here, your own original contribution. It doesn't mean that you have to have completely original ideas. It just means that where possible, you have to extract those ideas and paraphrase them or put them in your own words. But even when you paraphrase, you must cite the original source of that material. So plagiarism then is the act of copying, including, or directly quoting from the work of another without adequate acknowledgement in order to obtain benefit, credit, or gain. So it's a very serious matter for any university. Now, in NUIG, especially for the Adult Education Centre in NUIG, we use the Harvard referencing style. Okay, so your guide is to use the Harvard referencing style for all of the assignments that you submit. Now, the guide that we use is the Cite It Right PDF. Now, it's the 4th edition that we use. The 4th edition was published in 2017, so it is the most up-to-date version of this particular guide. Now, Cite It Right originally came from UL, but it's a document and the guide that we use here in the Centre for Adult Education. So if you stick to this guide and cite as this guide directs you, then you will always have something to come back to if there is an issue with your referencing. You can come back and you can say, well, look, I read it here. I read it in Cite It Right, the 4th edition. So it'll give you some backup, okay? Now, I know that this particular document will be uploaded to all of your main Blackboard pages. So if you don't have access to it, you will have access to it. It's also available on the internet, so you can copy and paste the link, and you'll have this link again when the recording is produced for you. Now, I don't know if you're all familiar with Turnitin. I'm sure at this stage you have heard about Turnitin. So Turnitin is the anti-plagiarism software that we use here in NUI Galway. And it consists of, I suppose, 3 elements. You submit a paper, Turnitin evaluates your paper, referencing all of their different archives, and then it generates an originality report. Now, we look at the originality report, and if you haven't seen one as of yet, this is what it looks like. This is what comes back to us. Now, this particular report is lit up like a Christmas tree. So the first thing that I would look at is straight up here to the corner, straight up here to the similarity index, and it's 47%. So I know that there's something wrong with this particular piece of work. Now, Obviously, it's my job as a tutor to go through this and make sure that you haven't gone to the accidental plagiarism side of the plagiarism continuum and that you haven't intentionally plagiarized. Okay, so I'll show you what I mean by that. So very often people can actually possibly accidentally plagiarize, and one of those questions came up earlier on. I think it was Abigail when you talked about your textbook. So there's two ideas here. So if you use a source that's too close to the original when you paraphrase, and if you use words that are too directly linked to the original source, then that can be accidental plagiarism. Another case is if you build on someone's ideas without citation. So even if it is your own idea or your own work, but you've built on someone else's ideas, that can be construed as plagiarism. Now that's towards the accidental side, and we like to think that most of the students that have issues with referencing and citation are doing it accidentally. I see Richard's question has just come up there. What % is acceptable, if any? Great question. With Turnitin, if we go back to have a look at here, with Turnitin, generally speaking, you should look to attain a similarity of 10% or under. Now, there will be similarities between students, for example, in terms of reference lists, or if your tutor has given you a template to fill in, of course, that will come up as a high percentage in similarity because it's the same template that each student is submitting. Now, in NUIG, as a general rule, we say that no more than 10% of your essay should be made up of direct quotes. So that's the general rule we go by. No more than 10% of your essay should come back as a similarity index. Now, Richard, it's not hard and fast. Within that, there obviously is a bit of give and take. And at every stage, there is a tutor at the end who will be going through your paper and see whether, if it has come up as a similarity percentage, whether it's referenced correctly, or perhaps other reasons for those similarity indexes. If you look at this particular case here, okay, we can see that this source here, this www.neuroscience.org, has generated 15%. So out of the 47%, 15% of this essay has come from this particular website. So this kind of rings alarm bells for me. So if I go down through the essay here, I can kind of cross-reference, and red is 1, and that's 1 up here. Okay, so I can see immediately that this whole chunk of this paragraph has been taken directly from this website, but there's no referencing in there. So for me, that's direct plagiarism. So I don't know, I would be questioning the student in this particular scenario. However, if this chunk had come back to me with an attempt at referencing, I might go back to the student and say, okay, so was it the fact that you just don't know how to do this? Okay, and we could take it from there. But again, I think if you have an opportunity to submit a piece of work and view your similarity report, it can be a great start to helping you understand what is plagiarism and what is good referencing. Am I good to go on? Yeah? Okay. Perfect. So now, the Harvard system is essentially made up of 2 components, okay? It's how you cite within your document, and it's how you compile your reference list. So citation or citing refers to the sources within your document. So this refers the reader to the exact place in your reference list where you provide the extended details, okay? So citing is within your document, it's in text, and reference list is your detailed reference that comes at the very end of your piece of work. Now, as I said, in the Adult Education Centre here in NUIG, we use the Harvard style. Now, essentially, the Harvard system or the Harvard style is made up of 2 elements, okay? So it's in-text citation, it's how you reference. But within that, you must choose to follow a particular consistent style. And that's why we offer you Cite It Right, the 4th edition. Okay, so Harvard itself, this whole system is really name and date. So even within the Harvard system, there can be a variation of guides and a variation of how you're told to cite particular things. So for us, if we follow the one guide, Cite It Right 4th edition, I know I've said that about 1,000,000 times, but if we follow the one guide, it means that there will be consistency in your referencing throughout your piece of work. Now, I see Mary's just put a question up there. What's the difference between citing and quoting? Well, citing is in-text referencing. So there's two elements to that. You can either quote, which is taking a direct piece of information or a direct sentence from a main source. And that is one way to evidence your piece of work. There's also paraphrasing, which is when you take the main ideas, but you put them in your own words. Now, Mary, we'll come back to that in just 1 second. So I have a few details and I have a few slides for you on that exact point. Now, Harvard doesn't recommend using footnotes, Liza. Harvard recommends actually placing your information in text within brackets, either part of your sentence or at the end of your sentence. So here's a few examples so you can see what I mean as we're talking. Okay, so the general rule for in-text citations. Now, Mary, this is along the lines of the question you're asking there. So for the year, you have to give the full 4 digits of the year. For the pages, obviously abbreviate to P for single page, PP for page range. Okay, now, even within that, there are variations, but all of these particular variations, these are all in the Cite It Right 4th edition. Okay, so you can take a quote from a single page. So Mary, this would be, for example, taking a full sentence from an original source. Okay, so if you take a quote from a single page in a main source, you put in the author, the date, comma, and the page number. Okay, so Mary, the difference between citing and quoting, citing really is the way that you credit the author. Quoting is if you take a full line, word for word, put it in inverted commas, cite the author, the date, and the page number. Now, if your quote spans multiple pages, the author, the date, comma, and pages 31 to 32, for example, okay? Now, for a paraphrase, so this is where you're not taking a direct quote from the source, but you are taking the ideas and you're generating information from the ideas that that key author uses. So here, it's a paraphrase, and what you use is the author's surname and the year. But what's missing here is the page number. So there's various ways that you can make your citations part of your essay. So you can structure your sentence to include the in-text citation. So for example, you can say things like Christer, and we're going to use Christer here. So Christer said in 2003, okay, page 31, okay? Or if you have no page numbers, now this might happen if you are looking up a journal article, if you're looking up something online. If there's no page numbers, count down the paragraphs and refer, if possible, to the paragraph number, okay, and to the section heading. So the examples they've given here is Christer, 2003, paragraph 11, or Christer, 2003, introduction, paragraph 2. Now, Mary, you'll note all of these are citations, okay? All of these are citations. Now, what shows me, the reader, that something that you are using is a quote, is a direct quote, is this. It's the inclusion of the page number, okay? If you don't include the page number, and if you don't have any other subsequent information like this, paragraph 11 or introduction, paragraph 2, then I know that what you're doing is you're paraphrasing. So you're taking the main ideas that that author has produced or has written about, and you're extracting and synthesizing your own information from it. So in short, if it's a direct quote, you indicate it with inverted commas, but what shows me in your citation that it's a quote is the inclusion of the page number, okay? Now, for direct quote, and that's what you were asking, Mary, we put the quote in single inverted commas, okay? Now, we usually reference it, or cite it, really, that should say, at the end of the sentence. Now, what we must include for a direct quote, so this is word for word from the author, is the author's name, the year of publication, and the page number or the range of page numbers, okay? For paraphrased information there, so this is information that's in your own words, but is building on the work of that original source or that original author. The name of the author, the year of publication, Do not include single inverted commas or use page numbers in your reference, okay? Now, I think at this stage, before we take a deep breath, it's really important to say there's no need to memorize this. There's really zero need to memorize anything on referencing. What you really need to do is know where to go to find out the information. So, for want of repeating myself again, the source of information that we're using is Cite It Right, 4th edition. Stick to that, and then if anything comes back to you, at least you can say, well, look, I have this guide, I followed this guide, and I was told to follow this guide. Now, okay, so Mary, assignments to write with a maximum 750 words, okay, with all the referencing, very good points, yes. So with all the referencing, is there going to be any more space to actually put your own ideas in? Just remember that the reference list at the end is not included in your word count. And when you do reference within a piece of work, it's really just a couple of words you're talking about. So even out of a 750 words essay, the amount of count for referencing will be very, very little, and it won't be included within your word count, okay? So if you look at these examples here, okay, so these are 3 ways that we can cite a direct quote, okay? So the first one here is Moran, brackets 2001, page 14, says that, and you see here you've got your single inverted commas, the reliability and validity of this research is questionable. So this is the sentence that's taken directly from Moran on page 14. The reliability and validity of this research is questionable. Now you can put the author's name first and then in brackets the year and then the page number, or you can use the author's name, okay, Moran, brackets 2001, the year. You can insert the quote, you can see here with your single inverted commas, and then put the page number to the end, or you can simply directly quote the sentence that you want and put the information, your citation information at the end, Moran 2001, page 14, okay? So there's 3 ways to do it. Either the author's name is part of the sentence or the author's name is not part of the sentence, but either style is okay. And Mary, these won't be included in your specific word count, okay? Now, this is your rule for longer quotations, okay? So a longer quotation should itself come in a separate paragraph. So really what you should do is make it visually different from the rest of your text. So put it in a separate paragraph, leave a clear line between the paragraph or the text that comes before it, a separate paragraph, indent it, and place it in a smaller font, okay? So then what you do is you can cite the author, date, and page number under the quotation to the right-hand side, okay? So the example here, it's not very clear, but that should be indented, okay? And then you can see, because of the direct quote, I know it's a direct quote, even though in this case, there is no single inverted commas, but that's okay because what you've done is visually separate it from the rest of your text. So I can immediately see by looking at it that it's a direct quote. And the second clue is you've got Krister 2003 and you've given me the page number. Now, Sean, fonts and sizes. That comes down to, I suppose, the guidelines that are given in your assignment brief. Usually for the text, for the body of the text, it's font 12, New Times Roman, I think. For headings, it's size 14. And in this case, when you are putting a direct quote, you can go down to size 11, just so that it's visually distinct from the rest of your essay or your report. But always double check what guidelines you're given in your assignment brief in terms of fonts and in terms of size, just in case there's any other specification, okay? And remember, no quotation marks for long quotes. Okay, quotation marks if you're using a short quote within the body of a text, within a sentence, but not for longer quotes. Now, for short quotations, now this is really, really short quotations, so this is less than 20 words. So if you're quoting something that's less than 20 words, it's most likely a particular phrase that the author is using, or perhaps a particular phrase that the author has coined. Now, in this case, Cite It Right 4th edition recommends that you use double quotation marks, okay, or traditional quotation marks. And the example that you're given here is, society has developed a boundary-free culture. And the reason I know that it's specifically directly quoted from Krister is because you have Krister, the author's name, 2003, the date, and page 31, the page where he uses this particular phrase. Now again, this one's double quotation marks because it is a very, very short piece of writing, and it coins a particular phrase that Krister uses throughout his work. So that one's a special case, if you like. All right. Now, for paraphrasing, so we've moved away from directly quoting word for word what the author has said, and we're looking at how you quote the ideas that you want to analyze or represent from that key author, but not as a direct quote, as a paraphrase, so in your own words. So there's two ways that you can do this. You can either place the author first, Doe, in brackets 1999, okay, believes, etc. Or you can paraphrase the main points that Doe has spoken of, and at the end of the sentence, you can put in brackets, Doe, 1999. Now, there's no page numbers with this one, okay? So there's no page numbers, and that indicates to me that what you are doing is you're taking the author's ideas, but you're putting them in your own words. So you're extracting meaning and you're analyzing what the author is saying, but you're doing it in your own words. However, because you're building on that author's original ideas, that's why you must include a paraphrase, or you must include, excuse me, a citation to that author to credit that author with those original ideas. So direct quotations, to sum up: author, date, comma, page number, and paraphrases, author and date, but zero page number, no page number. Okay, so again, you can see you can put the author's name as part of the sentence, or you can put the author's name at the end of the sentence, so it's not part of the sentence. So either style in this case is fine. Now, what I've done here is I've literally included a couple of examples directly from Cite It Right 4th edition, okay? So this just gives you an example of what that document looks like. Now, it really is extremely detailed and it's fantastic. So it'll give you an idea throughout of author, citing within a text, and reference list. So for example, and this is from books, if you have one author, okay, your in-text citation is Bookeroyd 1996. If it was direct quote, it would be Bookeroyd 1996 and the page number. And then this is how your reference list will look, okay? So again, author, first initial, year, main source, name or title of the main source, okay, edition, place of publication, and publishers, okay? Now I have this detailed again towards the end, so don't worry if I'm going too quickly, or if you would like me to review, tell me, okay? So this is an example of two authors, okay? So if you have two authors, your in-text citation, citing with in-text, this is time, it's Beardsworth and Kell, 1997. And then your reference list for this particular book will be Beardsworth, last name, comma, first initial, full stop, and Kell, comma, first initial, full stop, date, 1997, the main name of the book, okay, in italics, right? Place of publication and publisher. Now, where it changes is for 3 or more authors, okay? So we have 3 or more authors. This time, within the text, we don't have to write each author's name. We can write Cohen et al, okay? So et al shows me that there's more than 2 authors. So 3 or more authors use this here, et al. So Cohen et al 2000. If it was a direct quote, it would be Cohen et al 2000, and you would have a page number, comma, page number, okay, within those brackets. And then this is the procedure. You've each of the authors listed according to the Harvard style format. So names, date, and then the main source or the main title in italics. Publisher, place of publication and publisher. Okay. Now, if you have any examples that you want, what we can do for our next session is I can get you to maybe email me some examples of where you're unsure of what happened with your referencing. It might be a good way for us to actually have a live demonstration and for you to get a real feel for the in-text citation and referencing process. So again, now these are taken just directly from Cite It Right. So it has a section that'll take you through really every type of article or journal article or electronic article, book that you can think of that you might use. And it gives you, again, author, in-text citation, and reference list, okay? So here's the example of a contribution or an article or a chapter in an edited book, okay? So what you do is you cite the author of the book. So you cite the author of the article. So MacDonald, 1997, okay? And then when you come to your full reference list, okay, you follow the process. Now again, I know I'm going quickly here, but I will detail it in more specific example later on. Okay, so the author of the contribution or the chapter, okay, the actual name of the chapter or article will be in single inverted commas, and then in, Siddell, M, okay, Jones, L, Katz, etc. These are the editors. And then the name of the original source, the main title in italics, and again, place publication and publisher. And this time there's page numbers also to show that it's a section from this main book, okay? And again, sorry, now Evelyn, just to make sure you use et al. For 3 authors. So if there's 3 or more authors, you can use et al. If there's 2 authors, you have to say both of their names within the in-text citation, okay? So now here's a source quoted in another source. So Smith, 1990, in brackets, cited in Bookroyd, 1996, or all in brackets, Smith, comma, cited in Bookroyd, 1996. If that was a direct quote, it would be comma, page numbers, okay? So you can see there is quite a lot of detail that's involved in in-text citation and referencing, but you can see that in the actual guide that we're using, there's quite a lot of detail provided for you, and there's quite a lot of examples provided for you too. So it is really a fantastic resource. There was a question earlier about citing government legislation. Okay, so if the author is a government department, okay, here we go, Ireland, so the country of origin, Ireland, comma, Department of Health and Children, 2005, right? And in our actual reference list, Ireland, comma, Department of Health and Children, 2005, in italics, the main title, which is Statement of Strategy, 2005 to 2007, okay, Dublin, and then Department of Health and Children. Now, this is an online article, so I also include available, and I include the URL of where this particular document is available, and I also include the date that I accessed it, okay? Now, I don't want to confuse you by throwing these examples at you, so what we'll do is we'll break it down into a guide on how you look at formatting your Harvard referencing, which is really about sequencing, okay? So name, dates, okay? Now, so remember, to quote is to directly use another's words and to acknowledge the source, okay? So to quote is to directly use another's words. To paraphrase is to express the author's work in your own words and to acknowledge the source, okay? So this is Krister, 2003. Up here is Krister, 2003, and page 31, because that's a direct quote. To summarize is to broadly describe the findings of a study without directly quoting from it, okay? So it's similar to paraphrase, okay? All right, and again, Krister, brackets, 2003. So let's look at the Harvard system in a little bit more detail, okay? So referencing a book. Okay, what's important is the citation order, and this is good to get a feel for the citation order. So the author or the authors, name, okay, comma, initials, first initials should be capitalized, full stop. The next is the year of publication. The next is the title of the book or report in italics, okay? So you can see here we've got Joyce, comma, J, full stop, 1992. Finnegan's Wake is in italics, okay? If there is a subtitle, you put in a colon and you add the information from the subtitle, okay? If it's not a first edition, you must include what edition it is. In this case, we're assuming it's a first edition because it's not indicated in the example above. Place of publication, and finally publisher. So author, okay, last name, first initial, full stop, year of publication, title of the book in italics. We assume this is the first edition because it's not indicated otherwise. Place of publication, and the publisher, Penguin Books. Okay, so this is our general guide for a book. Okay, so here's an example. Your in-text citation for a paraphrase or for summarize or for a summary, Devereux, 2013. Okay, for a direct quote, Muntz or Muncie, 1999, page 32. Okay, now your reference list would look like this. So this is your in-text citation, and this is your reference list. So your reference list for Devereux is Devereux, EA, first initials, full stop, date 2013, okay? Main title in italics, Understanding the Media, comma, third edition, Los Angeles, place of publication, and Sage, name of the publisher, okay? Your corresponding reference for your in-text citation of Muncie, I can't pronounce his name, okay? Last name, comma, first initial capitalized, in brackets, 1999, the date of publication, the name of the book, Youth and Crime, colon, a critical introduction, this has a subtitle, place of publication, London, and name of the publishers, Sage Publications. Okay, now this is a book with more than one author. We had an example of this earlier on from Cite It Right, okay? So authors, names, initials, year of publication, title of book in italics, subtitle, if there is any, edition, if it's not the first edition, place of publication, colon, publisher, okay? So in text, it's Wallace et al., okay? Because this particular book has 3 authors, okay? Actually, it's got 4. So we have Wallace, J, McMahon, G, I'm going to read that, P, and O'Sullivan, M, 2013. Industrial Relations in Ireland, okay? That's my mistake, that should be in italics, guys, okay? 4th edition, Dublin, Gillan Macmillan, okay? So we have print journal articles. You can see that there's a kind of a system building here, okay? So the citation order is what's important, and it will always start with the author's name, initials, year of publication. Now, in this case, you're referencing a journal article. So the title of the article goes first, but what's important is to put the title of the article in inverted commas. Now, the title of the journal goes in italics because the journal is the main source of information. After the title of the journal in italics, you put the volume, in brackets, the issue number. If you don't have the issue number, it's the date / the month of publication, okay? And the full range of page numbers. Now you see how the more we get into this, the more I stress that this is not about you memorizing in any way, shape, or form how to reference, but it is about you knowing where to go to look for a guide and to be consistent within that guide. So choosing Cite It Right 4th edition, stick with that, because if anything goes wrong, then you can always go back to it and say, but look, I followed this particular guide. Okay, now I have some more examples for you. Okay, so this is a print journal example. Okay, so in text, the results, Rideout and Morgan, 2007. In your reference list, Rideout and Morgan. Okay, Rideout, last name, first initials, and Morgan, first initials, 2007. Okay, this sounds like a really exciting article. It's in single inverted commas, so I know it's an article. Major changes in fecundity and the effect on population egg production for 3 species of Northwest Atlantic flatfishes. Terribly exciting stuff. Okay, now I know the main source because the main source is in italics. Okay, the volume, issue, and the full range of pages. Now that's for a print article. Now, I have a couple up here that asked me about electronic journal articles or web pages, okay? So now, this particular sample is an electronic journal article. Now, the citation order for this, okay, again, it's a similar system. Starts off with the author or the author's names and their initials. Next, in brackets, is the year of publication. Next, in single inverted commas, is the title of the article. After that is the title of the journal or the main source in italics. Okay, this we don't need anymore. Okay, but what we do have to do is we have to put volume, issue number, or if we don't have the volume and issue number, we put the date and the month of publication and the full range of page numbers. Now, if this journal is accessed online, what you must do is you must write here available, okay? And according to Cite It Right, 4th edition, you can either choose to put a DOI, which is a digital origin of information, okay? Now, usually that's contained within the URL, so you'll see it, but it'll have these 3 letters DOI written in it. But if you don't have DOI, or if you don't have a web address that contains this, you put in the actual web address. So you can copy and paste the URL from where you're accessing that particular article. Now, if you use the web address, then you must follow it with the date that you accessed it, okay? But if you use this DOI material, then you don't have to put your access date. Now, I imagine that there are a couple of questions on that, okay? Because that can be quite confusing. So, like a language, referencing evolves to suit and to change to the different types of information that become available to us. Now, because more and more people are using information accessed over the internet, and because of the issue of web addresses breaking down or ceasing to work, this issue of DOI, or digital origin of information, has started to become something that is going to be used more and more within referencing. Now, it is part of the Harvard style of referencing, but we only use DOI if we see it in the web address at the top of your browser when you're accessing that particular article. If you don't have these 3 letters DOI in that web address, just copy and paste the normal web address and in brackets put the date that you accessed the information. Okay? Now, okay, an example for an electronic journal is an in-text citation. Okay, this accurate appreciation by Jackson, 1998. Okay, now I know this isn't a direct quote because there's no page number, but in my reference list, I have Jackson, P, date. I know it's an article because it's in single inverted commas, French intelligence and Hitler's rise to power. Okay, I know it's from the historical journal, and that's the main source because that's the one that's in italics. I have the volume, the issue number, and I have the full range of pages. Well, okay, now, I also know it's available at, now here I don't have the DOI, so what I have is I have the URL of where I accessed the article, and in brackets at the end I have accessed 1st of May 2007, okay? So that's my electronic journal example. Here's an example with the DOI, okay? Your in-text citation is Lynch et al. Signifies there's more than 3 authors, or there's 3 or more authors. So Lynch et al. 2013, Again, I know it's not a direct quote because it doesn't have page numbers. Okay, so I go down to my reference list then. Okay, so I've got all of the authors listed, in brackets, the date. Okay, the name of the article signified by your single inverted commas. Okay, the name of the main source, which should be in italics. Okay, and full range, the volume, the issue, full range of pages. But this time I have available, okay, and you see the DOI, this is DOI that I was talking about. Because that's included in the actual web address, I don't have to put in brackets at the end the date I accessed the material. Okay, it is very detailed stuff, and guys, please don't feel you have to remember it, but do stick to that Cite It Right guide. So, in summary, guys, references themselves should be in alphabetical order by author or surname. References should not be numbered. Okay, so this is when you're compiling a reference list. The layout, punctuation, and capitalization of references must be consistent. So just be consistent. You capitalize book, article, and chapter titles in sentence style. Okay, you capitalize all personal names and places. Okay, and you capitalize journal titles. And the main source goes in italics. Sorry, Richard, your question here, do you cite when you first accessed a web page or most recent? You cite when you took the information from it. So the day or the time, the day that you took the information from that website is the day that you need to cite and refer to in terms of accessing that website. Okay. All right. So I want to give you just an extra word on referencing electronic sources, okay? Now, references need to include a stable web address, okay? That's why we use this DOI, Digital Object Identifier, sorry, okay? Or a handle, which is your URL, okay? References should have an accessed date, okay, unless the reference includes a DOI, okay? So you don't need accessed if you have a DOI, all right? And the reason is because websites can be destroyed, can be broken, or can be altered. Okay. Now, I have another question here from Kathleen, which is, what is the difference between a reference list and a bibliography? So, a reference list is a list of every source that you have cited in your paper. So every time you have made an in-text citation or you have directly quoted from an author, you must associate that with a reference list at the end of your paper. So your reference list, a list of every source you have cited in your paper, okay? Each paper you write must have a reference list, so your instructor can identify the source of your citations, okay? So you cite within the text and you reference those citations with a full bibliographic reference list. Now, that's different to a bibliography. A bibliography contains additional information that you have not directly referred to in your writing. So, for example, if you were writing a large master's thesis or if you were doing your PhD, a bibliography would be something that would be important because you might have read something that has influenced your thinking, although you have not referred to it or used any of the information within the main body of your writing. For us in the Centre for Adult Education, what is really important is to have a reference list. So everything that you've cited in your paper can be identified through a full detailed reference at the end of your paper under the title reference list. But again, I stress here, always refer to the guidelines in any particular assignment that you're doing, okay? Now, coming near the end, folks. So formatting a reference list, okay? References need to be in alphabetical order by the author's surname, okay? Multiple references from the same author need to be listed in chronological order, okay? So the first one published goes first, okay? If there's more than one publication from the same author in the same year, you differentiate it by using A, B, and C. And I'll give you some examples of this later, okay? And references are not numbered, Okay, the layout, punctuation, and capitalization of all references must be consistent. Okay, so we capitalize article and chapter titles in sentence style, which means the first word of the sentence has a capital letter. Okay, we capitalize all personal names and places. We capitalize book and journal titles, which means each word has a capital letter. And we put the main source title in italics. Okay, so it's really important that the main source title goes into italics. Okay, now there's a sample reference list for you here. Okay, so you can see here the author's name is first, but then after your first line, you indent it. Okay, so just push it over one, you can indent it one. All right, okay. Okay, you can see here that it's in alphabetical order. Okay, and you can see that the main titles are in italics, and this main title here is in italics, but is all capitalized. Okay. All right, so you use hanging indents to visually differentiate between references. Okay, and you put the main source title in italics. Okay, and you capitalize articles and chapter titles in sentence style. Okay, so the first is capitalized, but the second word isn't. Okay. All right, now here's an example of multiple listings of the same author. Okay, so these are all Dewey. Okay, so Dewey wrote all of these articles, all of these books, combination of books and articles that I have cited within my piece of work. Okay, so what I do is I reference him in chronological order. So 1910 goes first, 1916, 1929, 1933. Okay. Now, here's a year where Dewey wrote 2 pieces that I've used, but it's the same year. So what I do is I just distinguish it with A and B. Okay. So in my in-text citation, I will have Dewey 1958A to support the evidence that I took from this particular piece, and I will have Dewey 1958B to reflect the information that I have cited from this particular piece. Okay, so chronological order and more than one publication from the same author in the same year is differentiated by A, B, or C. Now, all I can say in terms of tips is document your sources as you go. Okay, so each time you find something that you feel that you're going to use or that you feel that you could use, okay, keep track of where you took those quotes or keep track of where you took that paraphrased information from. Okay, the rule is if you can't remember where the source came from, you just can't use it. Okay, now there are different types of software, reference software that are available. Mendeley is one, RefMe is another, and some of you might be aware of EndNote. Okay, so if you like, we can put a little bit of information up on these particular software, referencing softwares for you. The idea here is that as you record a piece of information or as you read a particular book or article, you'll be able to copy and paste that particular reference list details into a Word document or into a piece of software, and it will help you keep a track of the material that you've read and that you're considering referencing or citing in the future. Okay, and here's the reference list that I have for this particular presentation. So guys, have you any more questions for me? We've addressed some of them as we were going through the presentation, but I know I probably missed 1 or 2. So it's up to you guys now. Yeah, Marguerite? Yeah, Marguerite, do you have a question for me? I'm not sure if your audio is on, but you might have to, oh yeah, okay. Is the Microsoft Word reference tool okay to use? Yes, yes it is. If you're comfortable using that, yeah, absolutely. There is a referencing tool built into Microsoft Word where you can copy and paste and store information. The only problem is you can't import it. So you'll have to copy and paste that information if you're going to cross between different types of software. Stephen, more than 2 paraphrases from the same book, do you only reference once in the reference list? Yes, only once in the reference list, absolutely. Only one reference is necessary, okay, because you'll have indicated that you've paraphrased and you've indicated the year and the author within your text. I'm not familiar with setting Word to Harvard style also. You can, in that reference function within Word, you can, sorry, that's where you can set it. Yes, so within that reference function, you can set it to record information in Harvard style. The only thing, Richard, the only thing that I would advise you of is that, as I mentioned before, referencing changes, like language changes, it does evolve. So you just want to make sure that the version of Word that you're using is compatible with the most up-to-date style of Harvard referencing. Will the slides be available? Evan, yes. So what will happen is this is being recorded. So once we have downloaded and edited the material, we'll be making it available to all of you. If you want, I can see about uploading the slides also. Okay, yes, great. Thanks, Evan. No worries. Gosh, the questions are flying in, guys. So is there anything specific? I think what I would like to get you guys to do for our next session, we do have a follow-on session to this on the Wednesday, which I think is the 1st of November. I think it might be very useful if you go through some of the references that you've done in the past where you feel that you're not sure where you went wrong, and perhaps you could maybe copy and paste and you could email me some of those examples and we might use those as working examples. Joseph, YouTube, I don't think it's going to be on YouTube. TED Talk, yeah, I'm up for that. Okay, all right. Mary, excellent. Referencing pictures and tables, yes, it can be really tricky. Yeah, absolutely. Again, I think it's useful for us to maybe put something specific together for you in terms of that. Seamus, no worries. The questions are flying in. I'm trying to keep up with you guys. Okay. Guys, have you any other questions for me? Really what I want to say is just don't worry about memorizing any of this stuff. It's just important to take the guide and stick with the guide. Okay. Oh, Joseph, you weren't offering me a TED Talk. You're asking me, can you reference a TED Talk? Yes, of course you can reference a TED Talk. Again, what I'll do for our next session is I'll put together information on how to reference some of the more, I suppose, unusual medias that we use now for our information. So there's really interesting, how do we reference YouTube? How do we reference TED Talk? How do we reference podcasts? How do you reference something from the radio? So I think it's really worth doing a kind of separate session on all those kind of unusual, I suppose, they're not unusual anymore, but in terms of referencing, they're brand new ways to access information. Okay. Marguerite, how many points are lost for not referencing correctly? That I can't answer you. It really comes down to how any particular tutor has developed their rubric. You know, I think the first few times that you write something, you know, it's bound to have some issues with referencing because it is something that is so tricky. So as long as you take it on board and you learn from the errors that you've made, and again, I can't stress it enough, stick to that Cite It Right guide, then you should be okay. You know, I mean, we say cite it right, but sometimes we say cite it almost right, you know. I think as long as we can see you've put the effort in, you know, you won't be penalized too much. Okay, so let's see. What depends if you consistently reference incorrectly? Okay, So even if you're making the attempt and you consistently reference incorrectly, then, you know, it's possible that, you know, you need maybe a little bit of extra help in terms of actually sitting down and putting together your reference list. The information is there in terms of Cite It Right. So as I say, try as much as you can to access that information. Okay. Referencing within a paragraph, no, that's not counted in word count. Referencing within a paragraph. Now, quotes, though, you have to be careful of quotes, because if you give a long direct quote, it can be included in your word count, and you shouldn't have any more than 10% of any one piece of work made up of direct quotes, because otherwise you're just listing somebody else's, even though you're citing it and referencing it correctly, you're just listing a full essay of somebody else's quotes. So be careful of that one. Usually the guide is no more than 10% of a full essay. But again, check on your assignment brief. Kathleen, would you use a reference list and bibliography in one assignment if you had extra reading done but not used in the essay? Again, you'd have to refer to your assignment brief. Personally, I think that your in-text citation and reference list is perfectly adequate. Unless you're specifically asked to include a bibliography, I wouldn't. Stephen, our next session is at 7 o'clock on Wednesday, the 1st of November. Now, okay, Joseph, I'm not saying it correctly, sorry, Joseph, what's the difference between double quotation marks and single quotation marks? Yeah, okay. So single quotation marks are to indicate that it's a direct quote that you're taking from an author, okay? Your double quotation marks then are to indicate that it's a direct piece of information or a direct quote, but it's a small quote, less than 20 words. So if it's a key term, for example, like the Christer's example earlier on, because that was a particular phrase that he coined to help explain his idea, that's why it's put in the double quotation marks, well, the traditional quotation marks. Now, for us, we use single quotation marks for any longer quote that's part of the sentence. But if you're going to give a direct quote that is in itself 3 or 4 lines long, then you visually distinguish it from the rest of your text by putting it in a separate paragraph, indenting it, smaller font. How soon will the recording be available? Well, this recording should be available definitely by the end of this week. I think possibly even by Wednesday. Now, next week, I'm not too sure, Evelyn, but keep checking your Blackboard page anyway, because all the information that we have will be posted up for you. Thanks, guys. I can't believe you all turned out. It's fantastic. If one of the authors on a reference list has a title such as Doctor or PhD, how is that dealt with? Actually, you don't put anyone's title, Sharon. You leave the titles out. You just keep the person's last name and first initials. Great. We'll see you next week, Richard. And all I can do, guys, is say thank you so much for giving your time, because it's a great thing to be able to do these collaborate sessions. I think they're very useful, and it's a great thing when technology works.